about 8% of their missiles. They're down to a small portion of their drones. And we've demolished many of their factories where they make the missiles and the drones, and the rest are all following. Our military has been amazing. We hit Carg Island, took out every single thing on Carg Island except one thing. We left the pipes, because if we take out the pipes, it takes a long time to build them. And at some point, something is going to happen that's positive with respect to those pipes. But there are some countries that greatly disappointed me. And, you know, I'm the one that got them to pay from 2% to 5% of GDP, NATO. And I get along great with those countries in NATO, but I always said, you know, the problem with NATO is we'll always be there for them, but they'll never be there for us. And when I hear the UK, which was sort of considered the Rolls-Royce of allies, right? When you say they were the oldest and they were going to be there. And I say it would be really helpful if you'd send over a couple of ships, and if you have some minesweepers, which they do, be very helpful. And the Prime Minister is a nice man. I think he's a very nice guy. He says, well, I'd like to ask my team. I said, you don't have to worry about a team. You don't have a team. You're the Prime Minister. You can make a decision. Well, I have to speak to my people. I said, you don't have to speak to anybody. So it was very disappointing. And then after we obliterated them, destroyed their military, their whole thing, and it became a much safer zone, he said, we're going to send over 2 aircraft carriers. I said, I don't want them anymore. I don't want them after we win. I want them before we start. I don't need your aircraft carriers after we've already won. So, you know, those things are very disappointing. And you have to remember, we have 45,000 troops in Japan. We have 45,000 troops in South Korea. We have 45,000, 50,000 troops in Germany. We defend all these countries. And then, do you have any minesweepers? And they say, well, would it be possible for us not to get involved? I've been saying it for a long time. This is the greatest thing to come out of this. We spend trillions and trillions of dollars on NATO to defend other countries. And I always said, but if it ever comes time to defend us, they're not going to be there. Many of them would not be there. And we're going to have to start thinking more wisely in this country. Some have been very good. 1 or 2 have been great. I'll tell you who the great ones are at the right time. But there have been some that were right up there, Peter. They were right up there. They wanted to do it so much. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you. You were talking about Iran a couple times today and what they did after Epic Fury began. You said they hit Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait. Nobody expected that. We were shocked. Are you surprised that nobody briefed you ahead of time that that might be their retaliation?
Nobody, no. The greatest experts, nobody thought they were going to hit. They were, I wouldn't say friendly countries. They were like neutral. They lived with them for years. Peter, they were going to take over the Middle East. They were going to knock out Israel with their nuclear weapon. But after we knocked out their nuclear potential weapon, they started building missiles, thousands and thousands of missiles. And they were going to do it with missiles while they developed. These are sick people. While they developed nuclear, somehow they were going to start on a different site, because that site was, you saw the site, the mountain. They were going to go into a certain area, which we know exactly where it is, and they were going to do that. And it's incredible what we've done. I tell you, the job we've done. You know, if I didn't terminate Barack Hussein Obama's Iran nuclear deal, you would right now, well, Israel would be gone. It would be incinerated, and probably the Middle East likewise. And remember, they have all of those missiles. And I heard they were sending missiles to UAE. I said, that's strange. You know, UAE is like the banker for Iran. They're like the banker. Qatar, their neighbors, they got along okay. Saudi Arabia. All of a sudden, Kuwait is getting hit. Bahrain is getting, all these countries are getting hit. There was no expert that would say that was going to happen. It's not a question of like, gee, should you have known? And if we did know, big deal. I mean, we have to do what we have to do. But we hit them so hard like nobody's ever been hit. We hit them very hard. And we've extinguished most of their missiles. We've extinguished most of their drones. We've extinguished most of the places where the missiles and the drones are built. We've fully extinguished 2 layers of leadership and probably a third, if you believe some stories. So we only have one thing, to have a little choke point, and they've used it very well for years, but it doesn't work. But I think this, if some of these countries that we've been good to for years, and maybe more important than that, some of these countries that get 90% and 95% of their energy from Hormuz, the Strait. Hormuz, a famous, wonderful, beautiful place, but you wouldn't want to be necessarily sailing a boat there right now.
I would not.
Okay, you know why? Not because of them, because of us. Because we've taken out their entire navy. We've taken out every one of their drone, they call it a drone layer, a mine layer. There's specific boats that are meant to put mines on. How would you like to have a nation that has 22 boats where their sole function, they're very different looking boats. You wouldn't want one for your family. They're not pretty. Their sole function is to lift a mine into the water and drop it a certain number of feet down. But they had 22 of them. We've taken out all of them. But you can probably drop them off other boats. So we don't even know. By the way, we don't know that any mines have even been dropped. But the thought that they would scares people that have billion-dollar ships. Yeah, please.
Thank you, President Trump. I'd like to ask the Vice President about his plans to go after possible fraud in California and New York. We know, of course, about Minnesota. And President Trump, first, could I ask you, you said earlier today that the new Supreme Leader, Khomeini, you don't know if he's dead or alive. There are a couple interesting reports about him today. There's one report that he just narrowly escaped death in the first airstrikes by stepping out into his garden. There's another report that he may actually be gay despite leading a theocracy that hangs gay people. How do you determine what's true, and do you have an assessment of this?
Well, so far nobody knows. If you look at his father, he used to give talks a lot, you know, talking about death to America. He'd say death to America all the time. When they say death to America, you should believe them, because that's what they would have. If they had a nuclear weapon, they would have used it. But they never had the chance. I never gave them the chance to use it. And other presidents should have done. I spoke to one of the former presidents who I actually like. I actually speak to some. I do like some people. It'd be shocking. And he said, I wish I did what you did. Could have done it. Other presidents, somebody should have done it. 47 years this went on. They call Iran the bully of the Middle East. And you could have never had the Abraham Accords. You could never have had peace in the Middle East. Now you're going to have peace. You could never do it with the dark cloud of a nuclear Iran. But Iran is a shell of itself. It's no longer a bully. It's the one that gets bullied. It's a bully that got beat up. We beat the crap out of them. And they deserve that. You know, when you see a soldier walking down the street without his arms, or being helped down the street because he's got no legs, or his face is blown to smithereens with no legs and no arms, those two, no legs, no arms, and a face that got racked. That was done by roadside bombs. That's the favorite weapon of Soleimani, who I killed in my first administration. General Soleimani. Had I not killed him, that was the beginning of their downfall, because had he not gone, it's possible that we would not be this far advanced in destroying Iran, because he was a really good general. He was a vicious, horrible man, but he was a brilliant general. And he was looking to knock out 5 of our military bases at one time. And the man that died with him was his counterpart in Iraq. And they were working together. And they got hit real hard. And if that didn't happen, we would have had a problem. But maybe more importantly than that, he was really the mastermind behind it. And they never found somebody to replace him in terms of the genius. I knocked him out. And that was a big step, knocking him out. But if we didn't get rid of the Obama deal, I terminated it against the wishes of my then Secretary of State. He was no Marco. Against the wishes of a lot of people at the time. You remember that, Peter? A lot of people. Had I not terminated, remember that, Stephen? You remember? They were all going, no, dude, this is not. That deal was a disaster. That was a road to a nuclear weapon. They would have had it 3 years ago. and it would have been used, I would say, 2 to 3 years ago, and it would have been used in the Middle East. And by the way, after they were finished that, they were coming over here. They never got a chance to do it.
I just want to ask you about something very interesting that you said twice today. That you talked to another former president
Yeah,
about the Iran strikes.
I did.
Was it George W. Bush?
No,
Was it Bill Clinton?
I don't want to say. I don't want to say, because
Barack Obama?
a member of a party, they have Trump derangement syndrome all, but it's somebody that happens to like me, and I like that person who's a smart person. But that person said, I wish I did it. Okay, but I don't want to get into, I don't want to get him into trouble. Maybe, hey, you know what? I think you probably know. You know, it's interesting. And maybe he'd be proud. And I could even ask him that, would you like me to reveal your name to Peter at Fox? Well, at least you have high ratings. Your ratings are through the roof, Peter.
Yes, thank you for noticing.
Congratulations.
Can I ask you another question about the war? If Iran, as you said, totally obliterated, got the missiles, got the first 2 rounds of leadership, Air Force gone, Navy gone, can we wrap this war up this week?
Yeah, sure. Good.
Will we?
I don't think so, but it'll be soon. Won't be long. And we're going to have a much safer world when it's wrapped up. It'll be wrapped up soon. We're going to have a much safer world. I had an obligation to do this. I didn't want to, I call it an excursion. I didn't want to make this journey. We had the highest stock market in history. We had low gas prices. Everything was good. And I know exactly, I know what, you're going to do it, and people are going to raise the price of oil, and that's good. But I know that. But that's a very small thing compared to allowing them to have, you want to see a stock market go down? Start letting them hit you with nukes, okay? I think, I said it this morning, I think it's a very small price to pay. And frankly, I thought it was going to go down much more, if you want to know the truth. I assumed that it was going to go down much more, only because people don't understand to a large, it's a big chess game at a very high level. It's a very high level chess, the highest. And I'm dealing with very smart players. These are smart people. They don't get there. You know, when you deal with some of these people, you're dealing with high level intellect, very high IQ people. These are not Jasmine Crockett and her group. These are smart people. These are really smart people, and violent people, and vicious people, and some very nice people. And some are very nice but violent. They turn violent. But you know what? If I didn't do what I did, we would have been hit. Number one, very important, was the termination of Obama's horrible deal. And number two, this beautiful plane hitting them 8 months ago, whatever it was, and taking out their nuclear capacity. That totally threw them for a loop. If they had that bomb at either time, 5 years ago or 7 months ago, if they had that bomb would have been used almost immediately.
Mr. President, 2 questions on domestic policy, bringing it close to home. First of all, the Save America Act, what are you expecting this week when this vote takes place in the U.S. Senate? Will the Vice President's vote be necessary?
I think it's imperative that it gets done. I'm not sure it is. You know, the Democrats have horrible policy. It's just incredible. But they stick together. It's the one thing they do. Their Supreme Court members stick together. Those appointed by a Democrat stick together. If Barack Hussein Obama appoints a member of the Supreme Court, that member never goes against him. And they're proud about it. They say, I don't give a damn if it's good or bad. That man appointed me, and I'm never going to let him down. I don't say that's right, wrong. I just say they stick together. Republicans go the opposite way. If Donald Trump appointed me, I'm going to show the world that I can be totally just and I can be independent of Donald Trump. He's not controlling me. And I don't want to control them. I just want to have smart decisions. They gave us a decision on tariffs the other day. that won't change tariffs. I can do it a different way. I always knew I could do it a different way. This was a little quicker, a little easier, a little better. But they gave it a decision that could cost this country $500 billion to pay people back. Because now I have to start the tariffs all over again. Very simple. And what happens with the money I've already collected? Why didn't they say, starting from now, go the other way? $500 billion perhaps. It's so sad. But one thing about the Democrats, they stick together like glue. They impeached me twice for absolutely no reason, unanimously. Fortunately, the Republicans stuck together, and it was something. It was pretty wild. But the Democrats have horrible policy, transgender for everybody, open borders, men playing in women's sports. But the one thing they do have is they stick together, no matter how bad the policy. It's embarrassing to watch them try to defend it. And in a way I say, as a Republican, in a way I say, thank goodness they have bad policy, because you'd never beat them. We have something in there now, the Save America Act. Voter ID with a picture, right? That's a 99% issue. Even among Democrats, Democrats poll at 89% on that. And then they have proof of citizenship. And then they have no mail-in ballots. No mail-in ballots. We have no mail-in. You go to California, they send out like 38 million ballots. Some Democrats get 7, 8 ballots. Republicans are a lot of times calling in, where's my ballot? Where's my ballot? They're lucky to get one. Jimmy Carter, probably the greatest thing he ever did. I thought he was a nice man, not a great president, to put it mildly. How did his attack work out in Iran? Not too good. I think ours is slightly better, wouldn't you say? But Jimmy Carter, the one thing he did after he left with Scoop Jackson and some others, they formed a very elite council, a committee that came out and said very strongly, no mail-in ballots, because we're the only country in the world that has mail-in ballots like we do. The only country in the whole world. People have tried it. France tried it, and they went away. They're now doing paper ballots, watermark paper, which is very hard to cheat. So when you look at what happens with this country, we really have to fix it. That'll be very popular. The other thing we put in there, just as best of, I call it the best of Trump. We have the 3 things I just said, right? But then I added on no men playing in women's sports, and I added in no transgender surgery, the mutilation of our children. We have no mutilation of our children, no transgender. I think they say that's an 80% issue. I think they're 99% issues, but whether they're 80% or 99%. The problem is we have a couple of Republicans. They shouldn't be allowed. They're horrible people. And they're willing to vote against anything. And we have all the Democrats who vote against it. So I think it hurts the Democrats to vote against it, because I'm going to instruct all the Republicans to say that so-and-so that they're running against voted against the saving of our children from transgender mutilation, right? That's pretty unpopular. They want men and women's sports. That's pretty unpopular. They want voter ID, but the Democrats don't. Everybody wants voter ID. Everybody wants proof of citizenship. And most people don't want mail-in voting because they know it's a fraud. Touches too many hands. I mean, if the postman gets it, this one gets it, that one. So these are all issues that are in the 90s to 100. I would say some are virtually 100%. And the interesting thing is they're that way not only with Republicans. I'm not talking about leadership. I'm talking about they're that way also, most importantly, with the people. The people of our country want voter ID. The people of our country want proof of citizenship. And that includes 88%, 89% of Democrats. And I think the Republicans, Eric Schmidt, Rick Scott, Tim Scott, I speak to so many of them, they all want it. I hope John Thune can get it across the line. He's trying. I mean, he told me this morning, I spoke to him, he's trying. I think it'll be a very, very bad thing for our country if they don't. We're just asking for basic things. Think of it. You can't have voter ID. Do you know in California, if you ask a person to show their identification, they have the right to put you in jail. If you're an official and you say, may I please see your identification, you're subject to going to jail. That's how crazy it's gotten. With a low IQ person, you know, because Gavin Newsom has admitted that he has learning disabilities. Honestly, I'm all for people with learning disabilities, but not for my president. I think a president should not have learning disabilities, okay? And I know it's highly controversial to say such a horrible thing. The President of the United States, Gavin Newsom, admitted that he has learning disabilities, dyslexia, everything about him is dumb. But then he looked at the audience and said, "But I'm smarter than you," or something like that. That was pretty stupid. So now on top of everything else, they call him a racist because it happened to be a black audience. I will tell you this. I think it was the worst interview I've ever seen of any human being in my life, okay? Anybody else have any questions?
On Iran, will it be necessary to use even a limited ground force to secure whatever nuclear material remains in Iran as part of that threat?
Yeah.
And secondly, have you made a decision?
You mean to go in and get it?
Yes, sir.
Why would I tell you a thing like that?
And secondly,
You know, I can't stand reporters. Sir, will you attack Carg Island? Will you occupy Carg? They ask me these questions. And I don't want to be mean, but they're stupid questions. If any president answered those questions, they shouldn't be president.
And secondly, sir, do you still plan to travel to Beijing at the end of this?
I don't know. We're working on that right now. We're speaking to China. I'd love to, but because of the war, I want to be here. I have to be here, I feel. And so we've requested that we delay it a month or so. And I'm looking forward to being with them. We have a very good relationship, but because of the war, there's no tricks to it either. It's not like, oh, gee, I'm waiting. It's very simple. We got a war going on. I think it's important that I be here. You know? So it could be that we delay it a little bit. Not much. Peter?
When you say Cuba is next,
Cuba.
is Cuba, whatever you do with the military there, it seems like something, will that look more like Iran or Venezuela?
Can't tell you that. I can tell you that they're talking to us. It's a failed nation. They have no money. They have no oil. They have no nothing. They have nice land. They have nice landscape, you know. It's a beautiful island. I think they have great people. You know, I know so many people from Cuba that were treated terribly, and they're over here, and they became rich. They're very entrepreneurial people, very smart. I know a lot from Florida, especially. There's so many people. A friend of mine started over with nothing. He's now the largest owner of gas stations in the country and stuff. I mean, Cuban. I also know, I was just with a fantastic person who's Cuban and made a fortune in sugar, you know, Fanjul family, right? And this family wants to go back to Cuba to visit it. They haven't been back in like 50 years or something. They largely come from Cuba. And we'll see what happens. They were asking me about that. They want to go back. Not only Fanjul, a lot of Cubans have said, oh boy, would they love to go back. I think Cuba, I know, is in its own way, for tourism and everything else. It's a beautiful island, great weather. They're not in a hurricane zone, which is nice for a change, you know. They won't be asking us for money for hurricanes every week. But I think Cuba see the end. You know, all my life I've been hearing about the United States and Cuba. When will the United States do it? I do believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba. That'd be good. That's a big honor.
Taking Cuba.
Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth? They're a very weakened nation right now. They were for a long time. Very violent leaders. Castro was a very violent leader. His brother's a very violent leader. Extremely violent. That's how they governed. They governed with violence. but a lot of people would like to go back. Okay, one more question.
A quick question on fraud for Vice President Vance. Mr. Vice President, you announced a couple of weeks ago in the EOB that the administration would be halting Medicaid payments to Minnesota until the state decided to take pervasive steps to root out fraud. Do you have an update to that specific situation? Do you think that that could be a model moving forward for the task force for states that won't cooperate?
So I don't have an update there. Dr. Oz is looking to it, trying to work with the authorities in Minnesota to try to figure that situation out. But yeah, I mean, I think there are two obvious tools that we have to stop the fraud that's happening against the American people. One is that when we see evidence of fraud, we stop the payments. Pretty simple, right? We know that the American people are being defrauded. Let's try to stop the payments and ensure that whoever's making these payments is actually complying with some basic due diligence and making sure the payments are going to the right place. I think the second tool, of course, we have, as the President mentioned, is we have law enforcement options. We know that some of this fraud is just bad. Some of it's criminal. We know that people are intentionally trying to defraud the American people. It's not just in Minnesota, it's all across the country.
99% is criminal.
Yes, sir. So this is one of the reasons why DOJ is such an important part of this, is because we have to make sure that where we see criminal conduct, we actually prosecute it. And the President's talked about this a lot in the past. I don't need to repeat it, but it's worth noting that so many times when we find people engaged in really, really bad conduct, you know, the local judge or the local grand jury tries to stop it. One of the cool things about what we're doing is we're trying to take some innovative steps to ensure that when we find criminal fraud, we can actually prosecute it all the way to the end.
Mr. President,
She wanted one question. She's over here, and you guys are over there. Where's your main camera? Is it this one? Which one is the main camera? Okay, good. Nice center, good. I thought it was that one. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. President. Mary Margaret with Daily Wire, not CNN. We just wanted to ask about DHS, still not funded, but we reported earlier today that 80% of the primary task force that focuses on investigating terrorism is working without pay. So should that impact Democrats' decision to
The
fund
Democrats
DHS?
aren't paying. The Democrats, we have a deal. They just said we're not going to pay. We're not going to do anything, and it's terrible. The Democrats are terrible. You know, it'd be nice to get along, but for years this has been going on, not just with me. For years it's been going on. Different ideology, but also different tactics. Here we are, we're fighting big battles with a very tough enemy and winning nicely. And we're not allowed to have security in our country. It's crazy. The Democrats don't want to pay. These are bad people. These are not people that love our country, I can tell you that. Very sick people. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Press.
Thank you.
Thanks for all